Well, I suppose this was only a matter of time before this, eventually came to prominence. Because when we're in the EU, they had a massive emphasis on checking regulations and hygiene of food. Highly important that we keep this. Highly important. One of the many things that people like Michael Gove, Nigel Farage, and etc. promised that we would have, these continued good food standards. And it was, I think, very important because you can ask anyone, I think, in anywhere in the UK and said, should the UK have, high food standards? Then the answer should be absolutely yes. That should be the case. And because we now have left the EU, because we now have less authorities, the local authorities who, once again, responsible for this, getting budgetary funding from, again, the EU to help carry out some of these checks. Local authorities, now that we've left, under increasingly budget pressure, do you think those services have been expanded by the government since we've left the EU or reduced? Well, shockingly, to no one's surprise, they've been reduced. And what do you think is going to be the consequence of that? Well, if you are seeing, shall we say, not only less checks take place, but less hygiene, less, local authorities being in charge of looking after sort of that stuff and checking on that stuff, what do you think you would expect to see? Well, of course, you would expect to see an illness rise. And that is exactly what we are seeing today. What is being described as a food poisoning Russian roulette. So let's take a look at this, because we warned you this might happen. And of course, now we've got the data and evidence to say, oh, look, food poisonings, illnesses on the rise. What a shocker. So, as always, before we do go into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, there's the Patreon, the YouTube thank you, the Pony Club as well down below. Yeah, I've forgotten which one I'd mentioned that. But anyway, on with this. This comes from The Guardian with the title of People in England Facing Food Poisoning Russian Roulette as Illnesses Soar. The public are increasingly facing a food-related Russian roulette, with hospital administrations from 3 common illnesses linked to food poisoning reaching at the highest level in decades. So admissions from Salmonella infections reached over 1,468 in England between April 2022 and March of 2022, NHS data shows. A rate of 3 admissions for every 100,000 people. It is an all-time high. E. coli and psychophambia have also reached record levels in the past 2 years, with hospital administrations from the latter reaching more than 4,000 and a rate of 9 in 10 on 100,000 people. That is now up from 3 in 100,000 in 2000. So what can you take from that? Well, it's exactly what we've been saying all this time, that if the government were going to promise, we'd keep these high food standards, then of course you would have to keep on funding the bodies responsible and make sure, checks were in place. But what has happened? We know that checks haven't been in place for quite some time. And of course, there's still big questions to be asked about when those checks do come into place. We've talked about the problems and, of course, smuggling, the fact that you can roll off the boat, go who knows where between there and, of course, the inspection point. And remember, you are under no legal obligation to go to that inspection point. So it's almost like there's no point in checking any of these things. Anyway, so the cause of this increase is disputed. Some experts do point to the various factors, including the weakening of regulatory factors, a weakening of standards in import checks post-Brexit, and local authority cuts, and while the UK Food Standards Authority puts it down to improved detection. So there you have your your culprits. Um, and UK food standards they say, oh well, no, we don't understand. We've got improved detection, so we're detecting it more. I would say that you need to look at the other experts when they are pointing to the weakening regulatory factors in standards, in importation checks, the local authority cuts. That is just a triple whammy. That even if you've got improved food detection um, methods from the UK Food Standards Authority, it's still shocking you are detecting more because of the weakening of the standards of the importation checks and the local authority cuts themselves. And that raises other questions of how much they have actually let through because of the local authority cuts. So, whatever the reasons, the result is a quote unprecedented rise in foodborne illnesses. Professor Lang, the professor of the food policy at City University, said that it was no surprise there would be more cases until the British public wakes up and says this is not acceptable. He added they should ask, why should I play Russian roulette with food? He put the cases down to a weakening of state attention and regulatory focus on food hygiene and safety. He added that the situation had been worsened by Brexit and local authority cuts and the fragmentation of the food safety system of safety governance. So it is, I would say, more that complete triple whammy. Lack of focus on state regulation and safety, the Brexit, and of course local authority cuts. It's an absolute triple whammy. And this was warned about, that if you lower or you take your eyes off the ball, you will see an increase in rates. And I think he is right. The British public are going to soon say, well, hold on, why are we having all these cases? Why has this increased? And as he rightly points out, I don't want to play Russian roulette with my food. I don't want to play that with my food at all. In that. So, aside from the pandemic years, admissions for Salmonella reached the lowest point in over 10 years ago, registering just 834 annual admissions just in 2013. 10 years later, the NHS data shows that number is now 76% higher. On average, about 30% of Salmonella admissions are typhoidal Salmonella, a type that is more likely to be travel related. So, at least we know there's, another reason we can put it down to, but that's still a lot. No, even if you take that 30% off, that's still a lot down to food poisoning. So in 2023, people were warned to be more careful with the handling and cooking of poultry products at home. More than 200 people became ill when a variant of salmonella linked to poultry eggs imported from Poland. The Food Standards Agency said it was now investigating the recent rise in the case of salmonella poisoning linked to poultry from Poland. James Morshed, the NUF poultry board chair, said he was deeply concerning to hear that these poultry products produced outside the UK are being imported from countries where salmonella cases are on the rise. Morshed said that the British poultry farmers are able to produce some of the world's highest food standards and have to meet stringent food safety environmental legislation, he said. Even though there are always and will be ways of trading nation in food, we should not be allowing imported products to enter the food system that may not be produced to the same standards. Lang said that the 1980s there was the very moment of astonishing action and focus on food issues. There was mad cow disease, all sorts of big scandals. Basically, there was an effort to clean up and tighten these across Europe, and Britain was part of that. In the last 15 years, all that has now been weakened. And I wouldn't say these standards are being lowered in Europe. I would say that this has been really since 2016. I mean, you look at um, the chart here. You look at 2015. There's a dip, and then right from the 2016 point, it goes up. You hit the pandemic, goes down again. Obvious reasons with the pandemic, because a lot of people took hygiene and washing their food when they went to the supermarket. So, you know, goes down after the pandemic, shoots back up. So it's not surprising that we are seeing this. This is what a lot of people said when we would start to see this, and the British public are not going to be accepting this. There will be other scandals that will now come along, and people will say, no, we want high food standards. So, Louise Hosking, the executive director of the environmental health at Chartered Institute for Environmental Health, said that this is an unprecedented rise in foodborne illnesses. The battle against such outbreaks begins with strengthening the capacity of local government and environmental health teams. However, while the increased funding is vital, it alone is not the solution. We must also address this insufficient numbers entering now the profession, which threatens the future pipeline of our ability to protect public health effectively, she said. So, because this and because your local environmental teams that would do these types of checks are having, staff problems, being able to recruit, budget cuts, no one wants to enter the profession. That's yet another problem to add to it. Anyway, um, so he said, so it is not possible to separate the emissions of salmonella caused by food from those caused by other methods, such as having contact with some animals or due to poor hand washing. However, some studies have shown that on average, about 80% of salmonella cases are attributed to food, with some of them rising to about 90%. A study published back in 2020 by the Food Safety Authority said that there were at least an estimated 2.4 million cases of foodborne diseases back in 2018 in the UK, with over 16,000 hospitalization admissions. Among those, the most common cause of infections were salmonella and Campylobacter. I can't even say it, but yeah, that one. An infection associated with the eating or handling of raw uncooked meat and touching pet feces. An estimated 97% of these cases are attributed to food. And of course, the Food Standards Agency says, "Oh no, we're putting these down to increased, detection methods." I would say, even if you are increasing these, even if you are, catching more of these foodborne illnesses, and you are able to sort of detect them more, I would say, well, why are we seeing a sudden rise in hospitalizations, in infections in general, in food? Unfortunately, this all comes back to Brexit. It all comes back to regulations, because regulations is the big buzzword that is really the big Brexit word that a lot of people really missed. And as I've said, I don't know how many times and time again, talking about regulations is really dry and boring. Like, the average general public would just go to sleep until maybe something happens, and then they question about regulations, and then they'll sort of turn on and go, oh, actually, this is really important. And especially when it comes to food, people want high, food standards. This is why there has been the continuous pushback against having things like chlorinated chicken and all the extra stuff that the Brexiteers wanted to sort of import into the UK, because it would lower our food standards. So this is yet another example of where I think the British public are going to wake up and say, oh, actually, these types of regulations are important. And this goes back to, again, the Brexiteers, where they always used to say, oh, regulations, not important. Don't worry about it. The market will take care of all that. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so. There is no country out there that has absolutely zero regulations, that is engaged in this crazy libertarian nonsense. Even Argentina engaging in that crazy libertarian nonsense at the moment, not exactly having the best of times. So anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time. And please remember to click on the like and share button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to help support the channel through Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee link, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club down below as well. So until then, we'll see you all next time.